All right, Denver Broncos draft recap. The Broncos, not a ton of picks, right? I mean, they actually at some point have had multiple first round picks in this draft class, neither at the same time, but they traded their original draft pick, the one that belongs to them, to the Seahawks, of course, in the Russell Wilson trade. They're hoping that ends up looking a lot better after year 2 than it did after year 1. They also traded a first rounder for Sean Payton, and they gave up their second rounder as well. So, with the, I believe that was with the Russell Wilson trade. So, didn't pick until 63, but still did have 3 top 100 picks, which is nice to see. And I think that they have some interesting selections here. Some picks that I'm, at least interested by, and I would say a fan of a couple of these picks in particular. So first, we're starting off with Marvin Mims. That's who they selected at 63rd. That's what the chart is the player, what position they play, where they were selected, and then where the consensus big board has them. So Mims was 70th on the consensus big board. An interesting player where, runs a 4.3. That's exciting, right? Anytime you get that 4.3 speed, you're interested with Mims. And my old expression is never let a day 2 of the draft go by without selecting at least one safety or wide receiver. So wide receiver, check. He's also just 21 years old, and there's reason to believe he could continue. You could continue to see his career grow. Had over 1,000 yards at Oklahoma. Had 2.75 yards per route ran. That's very good. I don't know if the tape fully lives up to what that might make you get excited about necessarily. But again, for a team like Denver, really depth at the wide receiver position, I think was a massive issue. I mean, their receiving core was, PFF had it ranked as, at one point, the lowest. I believe it got up a little bit, but was still very low. So, guys like Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy and Tim Patrick, they have players who hopefully can play, but still getting another guy in the room just feels like a smart idea, in my opinion. You also have Drew Sanders, a guy who, it's interesting. So he was 41st on the consensus big board. He was actually the number 1 linebacker on the consensus big board. He was ahead of Jack Campbell on the consensus big board, despite the fact that the Lions drafted him at 18. That being said, still, is he worth the number 41 overall pick? I was not crazy about him personally. I did not have him as, to me, 67. That feels a lot more where I would feel comfortable taking him. But at the same time, if other people like him, well, then that's a little bit, and I'm willing to, I'm willing to sort of understand that, hey, I'm not perfect. I'm not going to be right on every single one of my evaluations. So if other people like him, I actually kind of will defend this pick then and say, hey, you're getting a guy who some people think should be a fringe first rounder in the third round. That's pretty good. He's very, one thing I'll say is, you're banking on upside with him. You see a lot of upside. That's what you're doing. And if it was a fringe first rounder, I would criticize the pick. But when we're getting to this spot, it's kind of where you can start doing this. It's kind of where you can start taking some swings for the fences, not trying to bunt, not trying to hit singles, but, really go for it. And with Drew Sanders, to me, that feels like this is the selection. So I understand why he fell. I kind of agree with the fact that he fell. But at this point, I'm totally fine with the selections. Riley Moss, cornerback, who, first thing I always look at with corners, do you have speed? He does. 4.45, not blazing speed, but good enough speed there. Was 100th on the consensus big board. They reached a little bit, but nothing massively, so I'm okay with that. Those small reaches later on in the draft, fine. Can run defend well. That's important. You do want guys who can run defend at the corner position. I know people don't think it matters, but it does. That's something that can definitely be important, especially with these depth guys. A lot of times you get some of these guys who are depth corners and they can't run defend, and so then they get thrown into the mix. They were just drafted because of their coverage, and then teams realize, oh, hey, this guy can't stop the run. Let's run the ball that direction, and they get some big runs that way. So that's important. Should be able to be a solid cover corner as well. 6'1", has a little bit of size to him. Not the best production, but not bad production, and played more corner than he did at sort of outside corner. So that's something also did I say played more corner? Played more nickel is what I meant to say, as opposed to outside. Don't know if I said that right or wrong, but anyways, yeah, played more nickel than he did outside corner. So that's something worth noting. as well. So again, could be a depth guy potentially. You're picking him at 83. And then they didn't pick again for 100 more picks. So they, had a bit of waiting to do. I always wonder, what do you do in the draft room while you're waiting that long? I mean, do you probably, just hang out with guys? Do you put on a movie or something? Got to have the draft on in the background at the very least. Well, what do you do when you're spending that long in the draft room? I don't know. Probably just talk. But JL Skinner, a guy who some people thought should be a top 100 selection, was not. He was not even a top 150 selection or top 180 selection. He was selected at 183. Why? Why did he fall so much? I'm going to guess people don't love his run defense is going to be an aspect of this. Also, a bit skinny. He's 6'4", but just 209 pounds. But it was good in coverage. If you just pay attention to the coverage, feels like he was solid. And I think that this is someone who, as I kind of said earlier, don't let a day two go by without getting a safety or receiver, because those are two positions that you tend to get good players with. He was supposed to be a day two safety. So, in my opinion, they kind of get someone who could potentially be effective there. Now, again, at the safety position, you have Justin Simmons, who's awesome. You're good there. But there's kind of a bit of a vacuum as to who should be the number two safety. So, just getting another guy in the building who can compete for that job is always good. So, kind of a good move on several different fronts here with Denver. So, I'm definitely going to defend this pick as well. I think it makes sense. So, yeah, as a whole, I mean, that one was good. And then finally, you have Alex Forsyth, who is someone who I'm actually interested in. So he's a 7th round selection, a bit of a steal a little bit, was projected to go 226. They get him at 257. So, okay, great steal there. Okay, you're still not getting a star necessarily with a 226 eligible player, expected player, I mean, but still, rather be on that side than the other side. Pretty good analytics though for Oregon too, not like some terrible school that plays nobody. So I'm a little surprised. Seemingly has the size as well. I'm a little surprised he fell as much as he did. Really good pass blocking analytics as a center. And again, centers aren't necessarily covered. Aren't necessarily drafted too particularly high, but you have Lloyd Cushenberry currently as your center, who was a 3rd round pick and hasn't really shown too much. Could he compete for that job? I don't think it's out of the question. I really don't. I think that he could at least compete for the job, and at the very least, maybe be a capable backup if necessary. So as a whole, I think that that's a draft pick that makes a lot of sense to me. So, like the Skinner pick, like the Forsyth pick, and then kind of like really all of the picks. I mean, some I'm not crazy about, but to me, I think that they did a good job of just, getting consistently solid players throughout. And for that reason, I think I do kind of like this draft from the Broncos. They didn't have a ton of draft capital. There was no way this was going to be a franchise-altering draft by them because of the draft capital, but they made the most of what they had, I think. So yeah, those are my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.